sits for week 2. There are a lot of juicy matchups. You're either coming off a loss, you're coming off a win. You want to start this fantasy football season the right way, which means, hey, let's get a win sometime. Whether you're coming off a loss and you need to win bad in week 2, we're going to go over each matchup. You're going to be able to, it's going to be a long form video, so it's the easiest way to do it. I'm sorry. But I'm going to leave timestamps if you want to go to a particular matchup, and we'll go over that as it comes. What's crack-a-lackin'? I'm your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know. So go ahead, become a bro, and subscribe. Leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. It really helps a ton, so I really encourage you to do that. Tons of football on the channel, and I will be on the Twitch A tonight for the kickoff, Thursday night kickoff, for this banger of a game we have against the Bengals and the Browns. I'll be playing NCAA 14 in our dynasty, Georgia State, baby. Trying to get a winning season. It might happen. But I'll also be watching the game, and I'll be there to discuss with y'all about the game and some other stuff. If you have any questions or you need advice or stuff like that about fantasy football, leave it in the comments section below. I'm more than happy to answer it. I am very good about answering my subs, really, even my non-subs. Why aren't you subscribed? Why don't you love me? But I guess let's go ahead. Let's get into it. Oh yeah, my big board for the 2021 draft, that should be out tomorrow. I'll be recording it tonight after the stream, so that'll be up for y'all. Gotta love the football content, man. Big Ten is back, baby. Big Ten is back. But let's go ahead and get into our first matchup here, and it's gonna be, I already mentioned, it's the Bengals versus stinking Browns. Both teams coming off heart-wrenching losses. More so the I guess you could say more so the Bengals, because they really should have won that game against the Chargers, and the Browns just got annihilated. They got to just show they're a better team, which I think they are. Better team than what we saw on Sunday. But let's just dive into it here. We're gonna start with the Bengals start sits. Joe Burrow, for me, I know that the Browns defense played bad. I expected to play much better. I think he's still hard for me to start. So there's better options. I would go with a better option. But Joe Mixon is definitely a start. He looked pretty solid last week. Granted, it wasn't like a banger of a performance. Still, it's nice to see him. It's just nice to see him healthy. He was moving well. So I think he's a start. A lot of y'all probably got him in like late first or the early second. So he's probably going to be a start for most of y'all. And I honestly, I think he should do well tonight. I know the Browns, they got they're third against opposing running backs. I wouldn't fret the Browns. As far as the receivers, I think AJ Green is good to go. And he's good to go. He looked well. This defense last week, the Browns, they struggled with the receivers. They are 17th against opposing receivers. Granted, this is based on 1 week, but still they were struggling. And honestly, I mean, I'm not afraid. I won't be afraid of that Browns secondary. For now, I think Denzel Ward will do much better as the season goes along, and Greedy Williams, he's kind of up and down, but he's a start. AJ Green, Tyler Boyd's a start. He didn't get the targets I expected to him last week, but I expect those targets to go up for him. It was a big concern that John Ross had the same volume share last week, but I expect him to do better. So he would be a flex start for me. T. Higgins, I mean, I know. John Ross, I mean, he just has to hit the big one, but still, I think there's safer options out there. As far as the tight end, well, we're looking at Uzma. I know it's a juicy matchup here because the Browns kind of struggled to cover the tight end last week, but they were facing Mark Andrews. Uzma's a tough start. I mean, if you really have to, but there are better starts, but if you really have to, nah, don't do it. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look at Cleveland, and we're going to start with Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield is a solid guy to keep on your bench. I mean, his air yards last week, 85% of his yards were air yards, which typically indicates a big performance is coming. He's taking shots downfield, which is something you definitely want to see. He wouldn't be a start for me this week, but he is a guy to stash on your bench. I mentioned that in my waiver video. And Nick Chubb, I mean, just grind it out with Chubb for now. It's an okay matchup. The Bengals were actually pretty solid last week against the running back, but this is another situation where you drafted this guy probably sometime in the second round. You got to start him. Kareem Hunt, though, he's very interesting because he saw 13 carries and he had 4 receptions, so he is interesting in itself. He's no more than flex for me right now, but and even it's tough to say that, but I would give him the go ahead this week. And then the receiving core, you got to start OBJ. I mean, Landry, he's the safer option, most definitely, but OBJ, I know he sucked last week, but you probably drafted him in the first 5 rounds. And like I said, Baker Mayfield, he's taking those shots downfield, and it's certainly not to Landry, it's to stinking OBJ. So he got decent targets last week. Just ride it out. Hopefully you have a better receiver slotted ahead of him, but if not, it is what it is. And then the tight end, a lot of people, like with Njoku going down, a lot of people are high on Austin Hooper. I'm not one of those guys, but if you are in dire straits at the tight end position and you have to start him, go ahead. But he's like, there are plenty of better options out there. He is in a good matchup, but like I said, there's plenty of better options. Let's go to the next game, being Buffalo versus my Miami Dolphins. Gosh, they didn't look great last week. They didn't look great. And I think that makes Josh Allen a definite start, dude. He blew up last week. Like I said, quarterbacks with Russian upside, I've always said this. They're very highly sought out in fantasy. He's a definite start. Looking at the running back core, it'll be interesting because Singletary and Moss did split snaps, but I mean, the thing was Moss's, and people will look at Moss like, oh, well, I mean, he only averaged like, 1.2 yards per carry, but a majority of his carries came inside the goal line. So, yeah, his average ain't going to look pretty when you're taking snaps inside the 10. But, since he is taking snaps inside the 10, he has that huge touchdown upside. I think in this matchup, he has some real flex value. Devin Singletary, he looked like I wouldn't even say he looked like the better back, but there is a little upside to him, but I'm just sure that you have a better start. Zach Moss is a go for me. Singletary, I'm hesitant. I wouldn't do it. I was dead wrong about Diggs, man. Diggs put out a banger. Him and John Brown. I was super impressed. I mean, they got huge target volume. Fortunately, that meant Cole Beasley, not as much. And it's not like he's a big play threat. Not like Diggs or Brown. So Brown and Diggs, they're definitely starts. Cole Beasley, no upside there. So no thank you. As far as the tight end position, Dawson Knox, he was only targeted 3 times. You can do better. So let's look at the Miami Dolphin portion here, and it's no. I mean, I think you're safe to sit everybody that has Dolphin in their name or as a team. Oh my gosh, dude. Yeah, Ryan Fitzpatrick is a definite sit. I was surprised Myles Gaskin got the start and got a bulk of the workload. That really, really shocked me. And I mean, he didn't do terrible with that workload, but it wasn't anything that impressive. So I wouldn't start any of those guys. Not Howard, not Breida, he only touched the ball 5 times. Howard saw 8 carries, but they were all inside the red zone. Yeah, none of them. Devontae Parker's questionable, but even at that, I mean, he only had 4 targets last week. That was the thing. if you have a better option, do it. Preston Williams, I wouldn't do it. You could maybe say Gesicki, but even that, he only had 5 targets. Like I said, I love the Dolphins, but man, that whole team is a sit for me. Let's go to the next matchup, being the New York Giants versus the Chicago Bears. And Daniel Jones is very interested in this case. I don't think I'm ready to start him personally. He's too turnover prone. The interesting thing I saw in that game is he was very uncomfortable with the play action. Like, he does not like turning his back to the defense because he gets real finicky. Even like on inside the red zone, they ran him on a bootleg, and like the minute he faked the handoff, turn around, he was already felt like he was frantic. He was scrambling for his life. Gets hit, bam, interception. I think this guy might be a value brand Jameis Winston at this point. And yeah, that's a no-go. Barkley, you drafted him so high. So high. You got to expect them to be better. Granted, they were facing the Steelers. I mean, Barkley, he's a start regardless. They do have a good matchup. The Bears, I know they were a bit unhealthy last week, but they're 23rd against opposing running backs. Part of that was the red zone, though. And as far as the receivers, the only receiver I feel really comfortable with, and no surprise, Darius Slayton, dude. He put on a banger of a game last week. I know one of his touchdowns was kind of a garbage time touchdown, but 9 targets, out-targeted everyone else. Sterling Shepard is like a low floor flex. Darius Slayton's the guy I would feel comfortable with. It'll be interesting to see what a healthy Golden Tate does to this offense and does to the volume share, but we'll see. And then Evan Ingram, I think he's a start. He was on the field for 94% of the Giants snaps. Granted, that didn't really produce much, but yeah, you gotta like that. You gotta like that he's always on the field. He saw 7 targets, and you just gotta hope he does better. I think he's a solid start this week. On to the Bears and Mitch Trubisky, man. Wow. Gosh, what a game for Mitch. And honestly, this is a pretty solid matchup. If you don't feel comfortable in your starting quarterback, I think Mitch Trubisky is a solid start this week. And I hate saying that. And you know what? Like, I know he always produces against the Lions, but I think he is a solid start. As far as the running back core, the Giants were actually pretty solid against running backs last week until Benny Snell hit the field in the second half. So I think David Montgomery definitely has some upside. Tariq Cohen, I know he saw like, what was it? He saw 2 receptions. He had 7 carries, but he's just not going to be utilized the way Montgomery is. Montgomery has all the upside in the world. I think he's a definite start. From a receiver perspective, Allen Robinson, I don't know, man. Guys that are pretty pissed. Like you saw with Adam Thielen last year, man. He was pissed off at Kirk Cousins, and what happened? He came out and produced a banger of a game. So I like Allen Robinson there. I mean, he scored actually pretty well last week. Anthony Miller's a start for me. Even though he might have to go one-on-one with Logan Ryan, I don't mind that too much. He saw 6 targets. Went for one of his catches went for a touchdown. So I think the upside's there. So yeah, I'm not interested with probably anyone else though. It'd be nice to see them get Darnell Mooney more involved because he was lightning on the field for I think he was only on the field for 9 snaps, but he was solid. Tight end, can you trust Jimmy Graham? No. Let's go to our next matchup. Atlanta Falcons versus the Dallas Cowboys. And oh boy, there's going to be a lot of starts in this game. Because Matt Ryan, I think, is a start. He put up numbers. The dude was solid. He knew that he had to throw the ball to win the game. He threw the ball 54 times. He had 2 touchdowns, 450 yards. He's a definite start. They're going to have to throw to beat Dallas. So, yeah, definite start. The running back game here, Todd Gurley is obviously the only guy you would want to start. He saw 16 touches, which I predicted them using him on a kind of a snap touch count. So in the 15 to 20 range. So I think he's a safe start this week against Cowboys, who didn't do that well against running backs. I mean, whether it was Malcolm Brown, majority of it was Malcolm Brown, or Cam Akers, they couldn't do nothing. And at receiver, it's hard to sit any of these guys. Russell Gage, I think if you're in deeper leagues, he's a good flex option. But Ridley, I know Ridley is kind of a roller coaster, or at least he has been through his career. He'll go through these stretches of, oh my gosh, he's amazing, to what happened? Where is he? You just gotta you gotta live by the sword, die by the sword. That's what's gonna happen. You're gonna end up starting him. Julio Jones is always a start, and I think Hayden Hurst is a fine start here as well. He was what was it? I think he ran the most routes of any tight end last week, or at least he was in the top 5. So I could definitely see him in a potential shootout here. Have to air the ball out. He had 5 targets. I think, honestly, he's better than Austin Hooper for this offense. So I just expect him to blow up at least eventually. So I would keep him as a starter. On to Dallas. Dak Prescott. He's always going to be a start. You probably drafted him in like first 5 or 6 rounds. He's always going to be a start. He has the rushing upside. He's been a top 5 quarterback for as in terms of fantasy for like the last 2 or 3 years. So yeah, he's a definite start. Zeke's the same boat, but it's a great matchup for Zeke anyway. Tony Pollard's a bit interesting, but I still would just go Zeke here. And then just because touches, Tony Pollard just doesn't necessarily get all the touches in the world. He only had 4 last week. And then wide receiver, you start them all. Gallup, start. CeeDee Lamb, start. And Amari Cooper, start. The Falcons were 25th. They're 25th at giving up points to receivers. And this is a great receiving core that lost Blake Jarwin. And I'm telling you, those targets, I know they like to target the tight end, but I don't know, man. Even with who is it now? Dalton Schultz. He saw 4 targets, which that's pretty impressive, but he only turned 1 reception, 11 yards. So yeah, start all the receivers. Stay away from Schultz. On to the next matchup, Detroit versus Green Bay. We're going to start with Detroit here. Matthew Stafford is tough. I think he's a start if Kenny Golladay is available. If not, try to find a better option. On to the running backs. Man, it's not pretty, but Adrian Peterson, he was the bell cow. I could easily see him getting like north of what he got last week. He had 14 carries. I could see him getting like 17 to 20 carries this game. So it's not sexy, but yeah, he's a start. He's just a very he's a low ceiling, high floor guy. DeAndre Swift, he did get the touchdown last week, had the bad drop. But he only saw 6 touches, so I think he's a sit. Kerryon Johnson, unfortunately, is just an afterthought in this backfield. And then Kenny Golladay, if healthy, so you gotta check that out Sunday morning. If healthy, he will be a start. As well, Marvin Jones. But, I mean, Marvin Jones is going to be a start regardless, even with Kenny Golladay out. Danny Amendola, I think he's a sit here. Quentin Cephas is a sit, even if Golladay is out. So, yeah, it's all right there. And then TJ Hawkinson, he had the touchdown. He caught all 5 of his targets for 56 yards. He's a start. That's good tight end numbers to me. As far as the Packers, goodness gracious. Aaron Rodgers, yeah, he's a start. Detroit, I know they get Jeffrey Okudah back, but that don't make much of a difference, dude. He's a start. And then Aaron Jones, I could honestly, if they get a lead, they could grind this out. Aaron Jones did get a bulk of the work, which was beautiful to see. He had 20 touches. He is a definite start. As far as Jamal Williams, I think he had 11 touches last week, but I think we're going to see a dip in that because they want to get A.J. Dillon more involved. And I don't think they're going to sacrifice Aaron Jones's snaps and touches for AJ Dillon. They will sacrifice Jamal Williams, though. Neither of those guys are starts. Definitely only Aaron Jones right now. At wide receiver, Devontae Adams, of course he's a start. I would start all three of these guys. Allen Lazard, MVS, they're all starts. The one thing I would, if I were you, be wary about, if you had to pick between MVS or Allen Lazard, I still would go with Lazard. I know MVS is kind of more of the big play threat, but Allen Lazard has some big play threat to him too. He was the wide receiver too, though. Allen Lazard was firmly the wide receiver too. He was on the field for more snaps. MVS would kind of sprinkle in here and there. I know MVS was targeted more, but I think Allen Lazard, you definitely start over MVS if you have to. At the tight end position, he ain't got nothing going here for Green Bay. So let's just talk about the next matchup, Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans. This one's kind of a tough one for me because I know if you ain't new to the channel, you know I love me some Uncle Rico, but he's got a tough matchup here. Matter of fact, let me look this up because I'm pretty sure there's not a lot of big play upside to Uncle Rico, or at least the offense didn't show us any. I think he had maybe one or two attempts downfield for like 20 yards or more. Check this out real quick. Yeah, granted it was on the touchdown, but he only took one shot downfield, which it's kind of alarming. But I mean, that's what this offense is. They take these short gains, slant, short angle routes in general, screens to move the ball, and then they'll take the occasional deep shot, and they only took it once last week, which was kind of surprising. It's hard for me to start Minshew in this game, so I would just, if you're in a super flex league, go right ahead though. James Robinson, he might be a start here. He got the workload. He had 17 touches, was impressive. Which was more impressive was how he kept Chris Thompson off the field. That blew my mind. And yeah, I think James Robinson, I think I'm going to say it, he's a start. Like he's like a flex start, I think, at best, with running back 2 upside. But nonetheless, dude, I was impressed. I was like, wow. I just didn't expect him to get the whole volume. It was just wild. At receiver, I think DJ Chark is fine. I know he kind of had a rough week last week. He only had 3 targets. Granted, one of them went for a touchdown, kind of saved his fantasy value. But he is the number 1 in this offense, so I would stick with it. D.D. Westbrook, if he's healthy, he'll be interesting. Because it'll just be interesting. They got a bunch of receivers. It's so hard to pick who and what. I don't think Laviska's there just yet. They're using him in interesting ways, but still, it's kind of gimmicky. It was nice to see him go out for some legit routes, though. Keelan Cole, I still would stay away from. I only trust Chark. Sorry to say it. Tyler Eifert and James O'Shaughnessy, they're touchdown dependent, so just stay away. Both of them only saw a target apiece, so yeah, I would just stay away from both of those options. On to Tennessee. This one's a tough one, man, because that Jaguar defense played pretty darn well last week. Ryan Tannehill, and he doesn't have a complete Ryan Tannehill, I know he threw 43 times. He's not going to be throwing 43 times every game, though. And I just think there's better starts, so he's not a start for me in this week, especially if Jacksonville, if that defense, if that secondary is, I'm willing to say last week was kind of a fluke, because I mean their secondary is very experienced, and I was surprised with their play. But if they end up being the real deal, then Ryan Tannehill ain't going to be a good start. But Derrick Henry's always a great start, and I think they're going to ride him. You're going to see a much more of the traditional tight end offense here. As far as your receivers go, A.J. Brown's always a start. That's going to be a tough task for C.J. Henderson. Corey Davis intrigues me, But I think right now at this point, he's just rosterable. You want to kind of see and wait. You want to wait and see, I should say, and see if that target volume is for real, because he had 8 targets. So I would hit the brakes right now with Corey Davis. Keep him on your roster, but I just want one more game, one more sample size to pick from. Adam Humphries is a sit for me. Like I said, if they're going back more to the run game, because I mean, what? Derrick Henry still had 31 carries, so it was pretty ridiculous regardless, but I don't know, it was just a very weird game. That Denver-Tennessee game was very unusual to see. Just to see that offense be more pass happy, it's jarring. I think you're good to go with Jonnu Smith. He was pretty impressive last week against the Broncos. He had 7 targets. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Yeah, ended up pulling in a touchdown, so you are good to go with Jonnu. Minnesota versus the Colts. Man, I think Kirk Cousins is a fine start here, as well as the man, the myth, the legend, Adam Thielen. He put on a banger last week. I think we'll see more of the same. Kirk Cousins, he's gonna be. I don't think there's a big bust potential with him in this matchup. I think he's gonna have a QB 12 type of week. He'll be in that top 12, so I feel like he's a safe option. And of course, Dalvin Cook, the dude's the heart and soul of the offense. Alexander Madison, I'm not ready yet. He had 10 touches, but I mean, this is Cook's offense. And we already talked about Thielen. Justin Jefferson didn't get the workload that I thought he would. He was only targeted 3 times. BC Johnson got into the game a bit, and he had 4 targets. So Thielen's the only guy I trust here, and he's the only start. As far as your tight ends, I mean, Kyle Rudolph is so touchdown dependent. I'd stay away. And it sucked only seeing Irv Smith Jr. get 1 target. So I would pump the brakes on that. Thielen, I think, is the only receiving option you start here for the Vikings. And as far as the Colts, Phillip Rivers, man, he might just be a sit. I know this is a great opportunity with that defense, but we thought that about Jacksonville and their corners. And I mean, the Vikings, they got rookie corners of their own. Cameron Dantzler, some people will be like, oh, he got destroyed last week. I thought he played a lot better than what we saw, because he was always at the catch point. He just lost at the catch point. So I don't know. I'm very hesitant about Phillip Rivers in this matchup, despite it looking very juicy. I think there's just better starts out there. And this is Phillip Rivers we're talking about. Running back, dude, Nyheim Hines, Jonathan Taylor, they're both starts. Nyheim Hines, he brings a lot of value in PPR leagues. The guy had 8 receptions, he had 7 carries, and he actually, I think he was utilized in the red zone about 5 of his 15 touches came in the red zone. So that's a bit encouraging for me. Jonathan Taylor is now the bell cow, if you want to call it, for this offense. So yeah, he's a definite start. From the receiving aspect, I think Paris Campbell has huge value here. The guy, he had 9 targets, which was on par with T.Y. Hilton. We know Phillip Rivers loves targeting in the slot. That's why you saw Hunter Henry and Keenan Allen so often in the slot there. So I think Paris Campbell is a for sure start. It's going to be tough for T.Y. Hilton. I feel more confident in Campbell starting in this offense than I do Hilton. But Hilton, he's still a fine wide receiver 2 flex option. I don't know, man. Campbell's got that Jamison Crowder upside, bro. And then tight end, Jack Doyle actually got a decent. mean, he did Jack Doyle things. You know, he was solid enough. He had 3 receptions off 4 targets, went for almost 50 yards. I still think he's a sit. I think there's other tight ends out there with a little bit. You could probably find like a Dallas Goedert or somebody on the waiver wire. I even feel better about CJ Uzomah than I do Doyle at this point. So he's a sit. 49ers versus the Jets. I would think like you gotta go with Jimmy G in this matchup, man. I'm not saying he's my star of the week or anything, but he played solid enough. I mean, he missed on a ton of throws last week, but he played solid enough to where I'm comfortable in this matchup because the Jets were just terrible last week. I'm comfortable enough in the matchup to let him be like, okay, he should be a quarterback 12. He should be. Raheem Mostert, I really like in this matchup as well. He got good volume, which is what you like to see. He almost had 20 touches altogether. And I mean, granted, excuse me, he was doing it more in the receiving game than the run game, but he still led the team in actual carries. Jerick McKinnon is interesting, but I'm not there yet. He only had 6 touches. I'm not there yet. Let me see a little bit more. And I mean, honestly, I think he had more touches than Coleman, so he might be the new number 2 here. At receiver, who do you start? Nobody. I don't feel confident. I know I love the matchup, but I mean, who are you going to get? Like, literally, it's a shot in the dark here. Who are you going to go with? Mohamed Sanu. He's new to the team now. He just signed this week. Kendrick Bourne, who kind of served a little bit in the slot last year, and they would kick him outside. So he's probably the most experienced receiver coming from last season. Trent Taylor might be used a lot in the slot. I don't know. It's a shot in the dark. I don't like taking shots in the dark. I'm actually afraid of the dark. Not really, but I'm afraid of the unknown, the future. And I don't know what the future holds for that wide receiving core. Kittle, I hope he's healthy. So be sure he's healthy before you start him. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see. He would be a definite start for me. But just make sure the guy is healthy. If not, Jordan Reed might come in here and be a pretty sexy option. So just kind of be on that. Let's talk about the Jets. Sam Darnold starting against, I know this is a battered, bloodied San Fran secondary. Now Sherman's gone, but dude, I don't trust Adam Gase. I don't trust Sam Darnold. That's just the case. He's a sit. Frank Gore is going to be the lead back this week. Should be a good matchup. I mean, he's like Adrian Peterson light at this point. So now I'm not interested. Jamison Crowder would be the only start for me, but he is questionable now. He didn't actually practice today, so that's something you do need to be aware of. But Rashad Perriman, he only saw 5 targets last week. Turned that into three catches for 17 yards. I'm yuck. Like, you're supposed to be a big play threat. I don't know. I think this team just hates big play threats. I mean, we saw what happened with freaking Robbie Anderson. Just blew up last week. Now he's free from Gase. So Crowder, if healthy, is my start here. Chris Herndon would be interesting. I think he's definitely he's a low tier start for me. He did see the target share, or he did see good targets, 7 targets. Turned that into 6 receptions. There's not a lot of upside, but because of that, I think he is a start. So on to the next game. Got the Rams versus the Eagles. One team got a solid win against the Cowboys, and the other team is the Eagles, who lost to a team with no name. Very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Jared Goff. He didn't do well last week. He didn't do bad, but like, I don't know. He's tough to start. I feel like he could just explode any moment, but I think this team's going to be more focused on trying to establish the run. We saw more 2 tight end sets than we did during like the end of the season stretch where Goff actually got pretty hot. So I don't know. He's a sit for me in this game. It's a pretty decent Philadelphia defense. Cam Akers, Malcolm Brown. This is a tough one. Do you really think Malcolm Brown had that banger last year to open the season and then just it was downhill from there? Will that happen? I don't know. They did use Cam Akers a lot. I think Cam Akers is a fine start. He had 15 touches last week. I mean, Malcolm Brown had 21, so I think I'm okay with Malcolm Brown. I think this team is going to try to really establish the run game more, so I'm fine with either as a start. At receiver, surprise, surprise, Robert Woods. He's going to be a start, man. The dude saw 8 targets, turned that into 6 receptions for 105 yards. Cooper Kupp, I'm a little less sure about because this team's not running as much of those 11 personnel where they have the wide receiver in the slot. That's where Cooper Kupp really is good in the slot. He struggles with press on the outside. He only had 4 receptions for 40 yards last week. This is a pretty decent secondary there for the Eagles. And I'm going to go ahead and say he's a sit this week. I could be wrong. I just think there's better guys, better matchups you can take advantage of. So Cooper Kupp is a sit for me. And then tight end, stick with Higbee, man. He had a decent showing. It wasn't, what we wanted. And I think he did it. What really hurt his target share and volume was them running 2 tight end sets. But I would stick with Higbee. Just do it. Looking at the Eagles, man. Oh boy, dude. This team was hot garbage in the second half. I don't know how you start Carson Wentz after that game. I think, if anything, he will be mediocre at best as far from a fantasy perspective. Keeping that in mind. So I would stay away from Carson Wentz. There we go. Carson Wentz. Oh my gosh. That was like a Freudian slip. So like Freudian? Oh. But like, what if Carson Wentz is the next Kirk Cousins? Oh gosh, no. Miles Sanders, he's practiced this week. He will be a start for me for sure. Don't even care about the rest of the backfield. As far as receiver, man, this one's kind of tough. I mean, the guy who ended up leading last week as far as in points, it was Greg Ward. I mean, do you trust this receiver room? I mean, you should trust certain aspects of it, but I just stay away from it. I'd stick with the tight ends though, man. Stick with your Zach Ertz, even Dallas Goedert. I think he might seriously see an uptick in targets. Like we saw, he had 9 targets last week. So Dallas Goedert might be a hot name. And I told you to pick him up if he was available on your waiver wire. But stick with Zach Ertz as well. The guy had 7 targets in his own right, so solid. Forget the receivers. You're going with tight ends, baby. Then we got the Broncos versus the Steelers. Oh my gosh, we're going to Denver. Drew Lock. After we're seeing what the Steelers did to poor Daniel Jones, I'm sitting Drew Lock this week. Not that he was a really hot name to start. Melvin Gordon will be. I know Royce Freeman will kind of dip into Melvin Gordon's touches this coming week, but it sounds like Philip Lindsay is going to be out for this game. So I think Melvin Gordon's the only guy you start in the backfield, and I mean he was the most productive one last week anyway. Before Lindsay got hurt, he was still seeing a bulk of the workload, so Lindsay should be good. Cortland Sutton, I'd be okay with starting this week if he's available. Jerry Jeudy, I think Jerry Jeudy's only a start if Cortland Sutton is out. And then Noah Fant, dude, he was very nice last week. I mean, shoot. He's a start for me. I think he is I think it's starting to come together for him. He saw 6 targets. The guy's got really good after the catch potential, so he could really blow the top off a defense. I mean, I said that coming in the draft. The only thing I was worried about were those drops. But yeah, no, he looked good. I think he's a fine start this week at the tight end position, because you know how tight ends work. It's a tough position to start. Ben Roethlisberger, absolutely a start. He had a slow beginning to that Giants game. Just, you know, the guy hadn't played in like almost a year. Give him the benefit of the stinking doubt. Like, come on. He did miss on a few of his throws, and then he just turned it on like midway into the second quarter, even like second half, dude. He was just star-studded. James Conner. It's really sounding like he might be out this week. Keep an eye on that, but Benny Snell would be the start here. So it'll be interesting, but I mean, Snell was actually the more productive back last week too. So I would start Snell. If Connor is healthy, then if he's playing, then you got to stick with Connor. Unfortunately, that's just the case. But we'll know more about this backfield this week. And a receiver, dude. Juju's a start. He's now playing a lot of a lot of slot snaps, which is where he struggled with press on the outside. We saw the lack of AB really hurt him. Now that he's back in the slot, dude put on a banger last week. He's a fine start. Deontay Johnson's a fine start. I thought he looked extremely good last week, and he actually had 32% of the target share. So yeah, he's a big start for me. I'm riding high on Deontay Johnson. Claypool and Washington, I just don't think I think they're going to be a bit touchdown dependent or big play dependent. So I would stick away from those guys. Tight end position didn't do a lot where Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald actually split a lot of snaps. So both are going to be sits for me. On to the Panthers versus the Buccaneers. Buccaneers defense actually played very, very well last week despite the loss and giving up like 34 points. I think it was like 34. But Teddy Bridgewater, let's start with Panthers. He's a sit for me. I think that secondary is really good in Tampa. Christian McCaffrey, I don't think we really need to discuss this. CMC, he's a start every week. Even on the bye, even on your bye week, even on his bye week, you start Christian McCaffrey. I think it gets a little bit more difficult when you look at the receivers, though, because I mean, Teddy, he threw a lot. And like, DJ Moore had 9 targets. Robbie Anderson had 8. Curtis Samuel had 8. I mean, if you had to start 2 out of the 3, it would be Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. Just because they have the bigger play upside opposed to Curtis Samuel. This is a tough secondary, so I think I would go with Moore and Robbie Anderson this week. Ian Thomas is like a non-factor, so just forget it. Just forget it, man. On to Tampa. Tom Brady, I don't know, man. I think you might have more higher upside starts this week, but to hell with it. Go for it. I think Brady's like, that wasn't me last week. I'm gonna get back on track. But keep in mind, if you have a better start, like a Ben Roethlisberger or an Aaron Rodgers, you're going with those guys, obviously. Tom Brady is like a low tier start for me. And then looking at the backfield, I guess Ronald Jones is the starter. What? Fournette, he only had 6 touches opposed to the stinking 19 Ronald Jones had. Ronald Jones, I think, is a start here. Leonard Fournette is not. And then at receiver, if Chris Godwin is out, then yeah, I think Mike Evans and Scotty Miller are good. I think Scotty Miller, regardless, is a pretty solid start here. And Mike Evans, if Chris Godwin's good to go, I think then it's him and Evans. I don't know, man. Scotty Miller, he had 6 targets. We know Brady loves his slot guys. He's kind of a slot guy, so I guess technically if Godwin's good to go, they're all starts for me. I just know it's not going to end up that way. Someone's going to dud. If Chris Godwin's healthy, then bench Scotty Miller. Looking at the tight ends, OJ Howard's a definite start for me, dude. Gronk, he just looked like he'd been out of the league for 2 years. But he only had 3 was it 2 years? I think it's like 2 years. But he only had 3 targets opposed to OJ Howard's 6. OJ Howard, I think, has bigger play upside. So I would go with OJ Howard in this matchup. Then we got the Washington football team versus the Arizona Cardinals. This one's actually a tough game for me, because that defense for Washington's very scary. Very scary. Dwayne Haskins, he's a sit. We don't really need to go into it. Antonio Gibson, I think he's definitely a start for me this week. He was on the verge of breaking a couple of those carries wide open. I mean, I know he only saw 11. What was it? I know he only saw 11 touches last week opposed to the 19 Peyton Barber saw, but keep in mind, Peyton Barber, all those touches were around the goal line. That's why he had the 2 touchdowns. That's why his average is 1.7. He's just a red zone back. Antonio Gibson is the big play threat. He is the guy that I think will get a bulk of the carries if they're unable to get into the red zone. So I think he's a start for me this week. Peyton Barber, that's tough, man. I mean, he's literally touchdown dependent in my opinion. So let's stick with Gibson. At wide receiver, Terry McLaurin, I feel like is the safest option. To me, Steven Sims, it's just I don't trust Haskins enough. I know McLaurin's kind of his go-to guy, so McLaurin is Scary Terry's the only start for me at the wide receiver position. I would go ahead and give the nod to Logan Thomas this week. Isaiah Simmons didn't look that great. Granted, it was his first game in the NFL, and he was facing off against George Kittle. But I'm willing to go on a limb here and think and say, hey, Logan Thomas, he could produce. I mean, the guy had 8 targets, so willing to bank on that, So it's a low tier start for me, low tier. As far as Arizona, I'm so scared to start Kyler Murray this week. Oh my gosh. Oh my freaking gosh. I'm scared to start Kyler Murray, but you know what? You drafted him for times like this. He had a banger of an outing versus the San Fran, which was another scary defense. So go ahead and just pray. Kenyon Drake, I think, is a fine start here. He did solid against a very tough defense there, or at least defensive front. In the 49ers, he saw 18 touches. I know Chase Edmonds was very involved, but I mean, really the only thing that made his score high was the touchdown. So Kenny Drake's only start here for me. At receiver, I gotta say DeAndre Hopkins might be the only start for me. I mean, Larry Fitz, he saw 5 targets, but he ain't doing much with those targets. Christian Kirk was kind of a dud. My bad. So DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is the only start. And as per usual, if you weren't here with me last year, we don't talk about Arizona tight ends because they don't throw to their tight ends. Granted, they ran actually more 2 tight end sets than they did like all last year, but it still only resulted in a hot 4 targets combined among all tight ends. So I ain't worried. Kansas City Chiefs versus the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chiefs, you about start everybody. Patrick Mahomes, you start Patty Holmes, man. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I mean, after that game, you got to start him. Heck yeah. Receivers, a little more tough because you really don't know who to trust, who will get. Well, I mean, they use a variety of so many receivers. Tyreek Hill, I think, is fine. Sammy Watkins, he saw 9 targets, but we've been here before with Sammy. But you know what? The guy is coming off like a postseason run where he was very hot. He was hot in the season opener. Screw it. Let's go ahead. Let's ride Sammy Watkins into week 2. Mecole Hardman, you just kind of hope he hits the big play, so he'd be a sit for me. Demarcus Robinson was the biggest surprise with how much he was targeted. Almost had a touchdown, but I think Watkins and Hill are the only starts, and then Travis Kelce is always a start. He's been the top tight end for the last 3 seasons. Like, statistically, he has been number 1 in points scored for tight ends in fantasy football for the last 3 seasons. Tyrod Taylor is a sit. Did you watch the game? Yeah, okay then. Austin Eckler, I think you're fine to start him. I was a bit discouraged that he only saw 1 reception, but I like that he got 19 carries, so I'm okay with that. Joshua Kelly, the guy saw a lot. He did pretty darn well with 12 carries. He's doing a lot in the red zone. So is he a start? I wouldn't go that far. I think Eckler's still the guy I would start here regardless. Keenan Allen should be a target hog. Is what it is. He had 8 targets. I don't know if he'll do anything with them, but he had 8 targets. Mike Williams is really what you hope, the big play potential. He's kind of that. So in a game that they're going to have to score a lot in, he might be a low tier flex. There's better options. Sit him. I've done decided. Hunter Henry, though, man, he's a start, dude. Mobile quarterbacks love their tight ends. It's just what it is, typically, unless you're Josh Allen, apparently. But Hunter Henry is also a guy they like to kick out in the slot at times. Go ahead, start him. He saw 8 targets last week, so yeah, I think you're fine there. Let's go ahead to only 3 more matchups here. Baltimore Ravens versus the Houston Texans. Lamar Jackson, yeah, you're not sitting Lamar, am I right? The running back situation is a bit more murky because of the emergence of a DK Dobbins, dude. He had 2 touchdowns. Granted, it was only 7 carries, and it only went for 22 yards, but he did have 2 touchdowns. Mark Ingram wasn't that efficient either, though. He had 10 carries for 29 yards. So I don't know. This one's a bit in the air. I think if you want to be safe, just start both. Like, you shouldn't have both, but both I will make starts this week. I think both have flex potential. And then a receiver, Marquise Brown, dude, start him. The dude is I say this a lot in videos, but he is a big play threat. Dude had 5 receptions off 6 targets, 101 yards, big play threat. Start the boy. Willie Snead, he's a hard guy to trust. He had the touchdown. I mean, 4 receptions, 64 yards. Will it happen again? I don't think so. So he's a sit for me. Where the production will go, though, Mark Andrews was a monster. 6 targets, 5 receptions. 2 of those went for touchdowns, man. Yeah, he is a start. And then Houston, you gotta. There's a lot of bust potential here when it comes to Deshaun Watson. You drafted Deshaun early enough where it's like you might be forced into having to start him. But they really start the year off with some tough matchups. You know, you'd think he'd do better having to face Kansas City. That wasn't really the case. I mean, it wasn't terrible. What really saved him was the rushing touchdown. But then he's got Baltimore, Pittsburgh next week. I would make him a sit this week. But if you're not in a position to sit him, running back position, David Johnson, man. He's not getting a lot of touches, but he's doing enough. He had the touchdown last week, but I mean, granted, the Houston Texans were kind of forced into having to throw the ball and win with that, but I think David Johnson's a fine start, man. He had the touchdown. He averaged 7 yards per touch. So, yeah, I'm cool with that. Duke Johnson, yeah, you're fine. No, he's a sit. Will Fuller will be a start for me this week. I do want to see more big play from him, but he had 10 targets, which is beautiful to see. I do think Brandon Cooks will get more acclimated to this offense. They were going to bring him in a little bit slower. He only saw 5 targets, so Will Fuller is the only guy I trust right now. Brandon Cooks maybe in the future. The tight end position is a bit interesting because Jordan Atkins came away with the touchdown. Typically, Darren Fells is the touchdown guy. Yeah, you're not starting either of these guys. Let's cut the crap. We got the Patriots versus the Seahawks. Oh my gosh. Tom Brady versus Cam Newton versus Russell Wilson. I don't know. It's tough to sit Cam. I don't think he's gonna have to throw the ball to win this game, but I don't know. I think he's an okay start, but I'm still a bit scared, bit hesitant. James White, he wasn't really that. I mean, he wasn't that successful last week. Sony Michel was really saved by the touchdown. I'm not okay with any of the backfield for the Patriots. Julian Edelman, I think, is fine enough just because he saw 7 targets. And he's probably going to be Cam Newton's go-to guy. N'Keal Harry, he had a lot. He had a really bad drop last week, and just no. He ain't it. Ryan, stay away from the Patriots tight ends. So yeah, we're gonna go with Cam Newton and Edelman for that offense. Seattle though, man, Russell Wilson, obviously he's always a good start. Backfield is a bit murky, but I think we're gonna see Chris Carson come back to earth and get a majority of the carries. I mean, he kind of was in this funky sphere where he had 6 catches and 2 of them went for touchdowns. But I think we'll be fine. It's not like he was out carried though. Like, he had 6. Carlos Hyde had 7. Wasn't that great with his carries. Travis Homer came in, got a hot -1 yards on his 3 carries. I think Chris Carson, you're fine with. I think we see him. I'm really hoping it's not a committee, but I mean, I just didn't expect Chris Carson to be the passing back. So he would be a start here. Tyler Lockett, always a start. The dude is phenomenal. All 8 of his targets he hauled in for 92 yards. I might be wrong about DK Metcalf, man. It's just he's so big play reliant, but he saw 8 targets. You know what? So you know what? Screw it. I'm in on our boy. So those 2 are starts. Tight end. It looked like, I guess Olsen is the guy, but I mean, really what saved his value was a touchdown. So he had the 4 receptions. Disley had the 2. I'm not in on any of these guys, so just stick with the receivers. They're good. And then on to the last game. We got the Saints versus the team formerly known as the Oakland Raiders. This is going to be in Las Vegas in front of no one, but I'll be watching. So we got the Saints, man. The Saints, Drew Brees, he's kind of he wasn't great last week. He's not taking those big play shots, you know. He completed 60% of his passes and only went for 160 yards. He feels a bit touchdown reliant. Now he's without Michael Thomas. I think he's like on Brady. He's Brady tier right now. I'm willing to start him just because of the matchup. It's a very young secondary there in Las Vegas. Alvin Kamara, he is a start. He was very involved in the passing game as always. And despite not being that successful in the run game, he still produced a touchdown. Latavius Murray, expect to be. I mean, he had 15 carries, so he's very involved, and I think he's a good start here. The Raiders aren't a great run defense, so I think he's a good flex option. At receiver, with Michael Thomas out, man, they put him as doubtful, but the dude's going to be out. Manuel Sanders, I think, gets a huge uptick. You could try it, I guess. Maybe like, oh, maybe Traquan Smith will have a breakout game. I'm not going to play that. Manuel Sanders, I think, is a very safe option. He had the 5 targets last week without Michael Thomas. Or with Michael Thomas. So I think he is the guy here. As far as the tight end, dude, Jared Cook is good to go, man. I know he saw 7 targets, and it was 5 carries for 80 yards. So I say carries, 5 receptions. He was one of my sleepers coming into the season. So I gotta stick with it, man. I called him a sleeper, so I'm kind of bound by that. He's a start every week. Derek Carr versus this Saint defense. Miss me with that. Josh Jacobs, though. I said this in my award video, my award predictions video, that I think Josh Jacobs is going to have a huge year. I got off to a really good start, man. Really good start. He had 23 carries for 93 yards, but 3 touchdowns, 4 receptions for 46 yards. It's good to see him involved in the passing game. And it wasn't like, I don't know, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought he looked very good. So yeah, he's a start, no duh. Henry Ruggs, he was a little banged up, but reports are he has practiced this week, it looks like. So yeah, he should be fine to go. He's an interesting guy, and it's really tough. Give him the benefit of the doubt here in a start. Even Hunter Renfrow. I don't know. I don't think you trust any of the receivers. Only Darren Waller. Darren Waller's the only guy I trust in this matchup. He had 8 targets, hauled in 6 of them for 45 yards. He's gonna be the main target guy here. So Jacobs and Waller, those are the only guys I trust. But we did it. We got through every team. My voice is almost gone. So that's it for the video. Go ahead, let me know what questions you have, or if there's any way that I can help you out. But as always, till next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.